Hey guys, welcome back to Pistons Talk Podcast. Hope you guys are having a great weekend. Have a very special guest on today's show. You guys probably have seen his YouTube videos before if you're an NBA draft junkie like myself. We have Hoop Intellect joining the show today. Welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. Good to be here.
For sure. Before we do jump into this podcast, I did want to give you the floor to plug your YouTube channel, plug whatever you're working on, where people can follow you, and anything like that.
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel. It's called Hoop Intellect. Like you said in the beginning, basically just do all NBA draft breakdowns, scouting reports, big boards, a few mock drafts coming up in the future. So yeah, that's basically what we're going to be doing nonstop from now until June. And then, covering things like the combine and everything else that'll happen in between. So yeah, just a lot of good stuff if you're interested in the NBA draft on the channel.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we already have Pistons fans arguing Alex Sarr and Zachary Richey. I mean, like they're pretty deep into it. So I know that's like right up your wheelhouse. Yeah. So one of the first questions I wanted to ask you doesn't really pertain to this draft, but I wanted to kind of get like your unbiased opinion of the Detroit Pistons draft over the last 3 years, just like your overall thoughts under Troy Weaver's.
Yeah, I mean, so the last 3 years, that would be starting with Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey, or
I guess that'd be 4
are we
years.
starting with Cade?
If you count like the 2020 draft with like Killian and Sadiq and Isaiah Stewart and those guys.
Okay, yeah. So starting with them, obviously things didn't work necessarily particularly well with Killian. I mean, you had the hip injury from the start that kind of derailed him, and then obviously just kind of things just didn't work out in the way that you would have liked him from like a talent perspective, based on who he was as a prospect. But I think, as much flack as they get, and obviously for a team that hasn't won more than 23 games since Blake Griffin was on the roster, it's kind of rightfully so. I do think that they've had decent process in the prospects they've taken. I was a big fan of both of the Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren picks in that draft. I think the Asar pick was a good one at that point. It's just kind of the pieces all fitting together. It hasn't been the greatest, and then adding those complementary guys to kind of fill in the gaps in other spots haven't helped them either. And obviously you have Cade missing pretty much an entire season along the way as well. So I think that obviously you would have hoped that they would have gotten a Tyrese Halliburton instead of Killian Hayes. That changes the trajectory of your franchise completely, right? But some of those hit and misses are going to come for pretty much any organization in the league. So you kind of just work with what you got. So I think that they're in a decent spot, to be honest. All things considered, based off of just having talent on a team, but things haven't come together all the way.
Would you say, like, from a fit perspective, because a lot of them are non-shooters, like you look at Jalen Duren, he doesn't really have like it's not like a stretch big. Same with the Asar. I mean, he's not really known as a 3-point shooter. Do you think like down the line they might have to make a decision with some of their core pieces, because like ideally they don't really fit together?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the biggest question with this draft, and especially the next one with a little bit more talent towards the top and guys that can really change the trajectory of what you got going on. And when you have certain players who you might like, but haven't necessarily performed to the level or don't fit together in the way that you would like, or at least to winning games, then you have decisions to make in whether or not you take a Alex Sarr and based off of how Jalen Duren has performed defensively at the 5, and you have, those spacing issues. You've been running Stu at the 4, and then Asar can't shoot. So there's a lot of things that I think factor into that are going to factor into the direction of where the Pistons go in this next couple of years, and decisions will probably have to be made just because they are still in that talent acquisition stage as a franchise. They don't necessarily have the luxury of being like, unless you do feel like two prospects are on the same level, then of course you take the one that fits the best, especially when you haven't done that to optimize a guy like Cade Cunningham his entire career. But in most other cases, you want to take, the best player possible and then figure out what to do with everybody else that might already be on the roster.
Yeah, I know a lot of people last year. I remember the conversations with fit wise, like Brandon Miller. I think a lot of people were saying like that's the best fit for the Pistons, ideally, because you got someone that can space the floor for Cade Cunningham. And I don't know if you ever saw like some of the lineups that they were putting out this year. Like they had like Killian Hayes starting at the 2, and then like it reminded me of like 2013, like Andre Drummond, Greg Monroe, Josh Smith spacing, like atrocious spacing. Like, and I felt bad for Cade because it's like he can't go to the lane because it's clogged. No one on the team at the time could really set a pick. He couldn't shoot a 3. It was just horrendous spacing. But from your perspective, I get like taking the best player available, but in the Pistons case, it hasn't really panned out in the win total so far.
That's the thing, is like, yeah, and in my mind, that's the first thing I go to is we want to be able to optimize Cade, right? We've been losing I'm just putting myself in the Pistons' shoes. We've been losing for a long time. We want to be able to speed up that process and get players that actually make sense on the basketball court, and hopefully get the coach to play those players in rotations that we like or that make NBA sense in 2024. But at the same time, you don't want to pass up the opportunity of getting, let's just say Sar or whoever else, when you pick the player who fits but is not as good. I think an example of that would have been in 2019 when the Cavs took Darius Garland when they had Colin Sexton the year before. You got 2 small guards. Darius Garland is obviously he's had a little bit more of a down season this year, but they could have very easily taken Jarrett Culver that fit better with what the Cavs had going on. But Darius Garland made an all-star team. Jarrett Culver is out of the league. So those are the things that you kind of have to weigh when you're in a position like this. And then hopefully they do a better job of filling the gaps, getting people who can actually contribute, veterans in the meantime.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Everything you say. It's just, sometimes when I say it, people are just like, you don't know what you're talking about. But the fact that you're basically saying the same thing that I've been saying for like maybe the past like 2-3 years, maybe it'll actually like get through some Pistons fans' heads. Like it's absolutely insane sometimes. So one of the next topics I did want to like ask you, obviously we're talking about like fit. We're talking about just the overall draft. So obviously like they've drafted best available, but do you think, they're going to have a top 5 pick? Do you think that they should just go for the fit because they've tried best available and it hasn't really panned out for them so far?
Yeah, I think that it's just going to depend on who that is, honestly. This class is interesting because there isn't a crazy hierarchy in terms of like the top prospects. There's a lot of different guys towards the top. There's some that probably don't make a ton of sense there in terms of like just a pure upside. Like if you're picking Donovan Clingan top 5, I just don't think that would make any sense for what the Pistons have going on, even though I think that he's going to be a solid NBA player for what he does. But I don't know. It's just kind of it's like a big draft philosophy question for the Pistons. And like I said earlier, you want to take the fit, but not at the sacrifice of getting a player that could help you push forward and maybe change the way that you think the franchise is going with like the Ivies and Durans in place. Maybe it's this guy. Maybe it is Reza Shea. Maybe it's Matas Buzelis or obviously another non-shooter in like Ron Holland when you have Asar is probably not going to be the best either. But it's kind of you kind of have to evaluate the entire roster as a whole of prospects and how you see them panning out, and whoever kind of those options are at the top of the draft in the top 5, you just kind of roll with them. But yeah, it's a hard thing to juggle because you don't want to. You also don't want to take another player who is talented, but in this context, they're not going to be able to do anything. And Kay's going to be even more frustrated at the fact that you got Alex Sarr who can't shoot yet, and Jalen Duren in the front court. You're back at step 1. You got to start at the 3. Like nothing is going to happen that's positive in that environment. So it's like you have to figure out how to make decisions on the talents you have and make it make more basketball sense, and hopefully, get going in the right direction.
Yeah, I think that's probably a debate that I think a lot of NBA draft analysts like yourself and even Pistons fans too will probably have debates over, fit or, best available talent. Because I mean, like you could argue that, Alex Sarr is the best available talent, but maybe a guy like Reed Shepherd fits better with Kate in the backcourt because he can shoot the hell out of the ball. Like, I think it's an interesting conversation, but I could see where you're coming from in the aspect of, trying to get that best available player and trying to just maybe stockpile assets. If maybe that's their long-term goal. I don't really know. I don't even know if there is like an actual plan with this team right now, because I was having conversations about like Gigi Jackson, who I thought would be a good fit for the Pistons. And they traded up to get who I love, Marcus Sasser, by the way. I think he's a really good player, but I didn't really think we needed another guard when we had Jaden Ivey and Killian Hayes and others.
Yeah.
But Gigi's looking like a star, like straight up.
Yeah, that's a I didn't really understand that pick. I think Marcus Sasser is going to be a solid guard in the league in his career. But, I honestly, just as a whole, like when you're talking about Gigi, the fact that he fell to 45 is kind of surprising. I kind of moved away from him a little bit more than I probably should have towards the end of the year. I just felt like maybe he was a little bit too, I would say like immature, or there just weren't enough like tangible things in his game. Like you can see all the upside of the shot creation, and that's what we've seen, especially with him getting the opportunity with Memphis having all their injuries. But for the Pistons, that's a guy that you absolutely want to get in the mix instead of an older, kind of undersized combo guard like Sasser, especially when you have Killian Hayes coming into the year, Jaden Ivey, Cade Cunningham.
Yeah, it didn't make like any sense. Like the whole offseason, the drafts, it's just like I like Sasser, but he's 23. I mean, it doesn't like really scare. He's right. He was 22, but 23 now. It didn't scare you. I get it, but I thought we needed more small forward depth because like at the time, all we really had was like Isaiah Livers. Like I love Isaiah Livers because he went to Michigan. Like I think he's a good player. He's just had like a lot of bad injury history. Coming through the draft and then not being able to stay healthy. I don't know. That was just a weird pick to me.
Yeah. That one was. I was actually kind of pretty surprised that he went that high, especially with some of the other options that were around. And anytime that you don't have wings, you should probably get one. And as raw as he was, and it's kind of revisionist history now in some cases, but I still felt like he was a worthy pick in the late first round for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I did want to talk to you about Alex Sarr because I think that's a name that even like maybe a casual NBA fan has probably heard of. I know he did play at Overtime Elite for a little bit, but is he playing over in I can't remember what the team he's playing for right now. The Wildcats.
He's playing Perth Wildcats in NBL.
Okay. So my question to you would be is, given, they have Jalen Duren, do you think he would be a good fit for the Pistons?
On paper, probably not, unless you think that he can shoot early. And maybe not, maybe it doesn't need to happen in year one, but It would have to happen at some point in the first probably year or two, just for knowing the timeline that Cade is on and kind of the struggles that have been there with that. Again, going back to Asar being at where he is as a shooter also, and, having him as somebody who you probably want to factor as one of your core pieces going forward. But yeah, fit-wise, I think it would be more of you're taking him for the talent purposes. You go ahead and play him and Duren together, see what they can do, see how it looks, how his shot is coming along. Obviously, you've got an example like Evan Mobley and Jared Allen and the way that they've been able to make things happen. So it's not necessarily impossible in the league to do something that looks similar. But I think ultimately, when you've got two guys who probably are most optimized as fives in the NBA, you probably have to make that decision at some point. So I think if you think Sar is going to be a better player, then you go ahead, or has the potential to be a better player, you go ahead and do it. If not, then you probably should look elsewhere. That's kind of where the two roles split on Sar. I personally think he's the best player in the draft and would consider him. I also was very high on Jalen Duren for people who, watched my stuff that year. So it's kind of it's a tough decision, but one that, especially given some of where his defense has gone in the league to this point and kind of underwhelming in certain aspects, then maybe you make that decision. But that's kind of a trade, because obviously he's more physical. There's certain things that he's able to do that Sar won't, but there's also the ways that he can cover ground, defending the pick and roll and all those types of things that he has a leg up on.
I would say like this year with Duren, like his defense completely like fell off a cliff. Like, his rookie year, he was protecting the rim. I don't know if it's all the ankle injuries he's had in his, first 2 years in the NBA. I mean, you can look it up. Like 90% of his injuries have all been ankle related. So I don't know if that's affecting him to, be a rim protector, but there are instances this year where he just wasn't trying. Like James Wiseman, for all intents and purposes, was probably the Pistons' best defender at center. And it's not a shot at James Wiseman. I mean, that's just how bad Jalen Duren was. So I think some Pistons fans look at Sar and they look at the defensive potential. They look at how he can protect the rim. He's got really quick feet for a big man too. Like that's something I noticed about him. Like just like watching the tape, watching some games on him.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Pistons fans get intrigued from, because maybe you draft Sar and Duren's coming off your bench. Because I personally don't think like this a too big lineup with them stylistically from a spacing perspective makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think that you could probably do it because the Pistons are rebuilding. You could figure it out, but obviously you've had the experience of running two bigs the last however many years, and it's just not going to work unless he can shoot. That's the thing. If he can shoot it early enough, then you might have something. And at least draw some type of respect and from the defense. Even Isaiah Stewart, as much as he's improved as a shooter over time, he's not really getting the respect from the defense. So the spacing isn't exactly there. His threat as a shooter just isn't making as big of an impact. But yeah, that would be the thing. It's just going to come down to whether or not you think that Sar is a better player or is going to be a better player than Duren. And I think that, his versatility on the defensive end and the ways that he's able to cover ground, and then also some of the offensive upside, just being able to do a little bit more things and handle the ball a little bit. Obviously, it's not all there yet right now, but in the future, he obviously has the potential to do things that Jalen Duren just won't be able to.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch Sar, he's got a little bit of I see a little bit of Jaren Jackson in there. When he posts up, I see a little bit of Joel Embiid, just like the footwork. Like there's so much flashes there with him. I think that's where I would be intrigued. If we're lucky to get the first pick, we're probably going to get washed and get fifth again. It happens every year, but you never really know. Like honestly, man, I don't know what it is. I just think the NBA lottery is not too kind to Pistons fans over the last couple of years.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think the fifth pick would be the worst thing possible. Obviously, last year, missing out on getting Victor Wembanyama, I don't think we talk about how how colossal because that was my favorite fit for him. The Pistons were, because you had somebody like Cade there already. You have Duran who could, bang inside just a little bit early on. Obviously, they tried that in San Antonio. It ended up he's kind of has to play the 5 full time to like fully get out of him what you can. But I thought that was a really good landing spot for him in the future. And obviously, you go down to 5, get a Sar, who I think is good, but there's just 2 different worlds of conversations we'd be having right now. If it was Cade and Wemby this year, I think they probably win 30 games just off the strength of that. And then in this year's draft, I think if you get to the 5th spot, like that makes your options a little bit easier. Whoever has been taken from that point, you don't have the pressure of like putting this guy as the number 1 pick and all the things that come with that. And it might end up being somebody who on paper fits a little bit better and is also the best player available. So that's just a glass half full type of outlook on it.
Oh, trust me, I had those conversations last year. Like, I was a really big Brandon Miller guy. Like I said, I don't expect us to win the lottery, but if you're like at 2, 3, Brandon Miller, maybe you try Scoot Henderson, I don't know. Like that draft class last year, as much as people said it was weak, like you look in the first round, even the second, like there was a lot of talent in that draft.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the better classes of the last 10 years at least. I think obviously you got Wemby, you've got Brandon Miller. Both the Thompson twins have high-level flashes this year. And then even going down to like Jaime Jaquez and Podziemski and Derek Lively, like there's just a lot of talent there.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. That's why I tried to tell like people that like watch this podcast on a regular basis, like because a lot of people are saying this is the weakest draft like ever. I was like, I could pull up like a early 2000s draft and say like that's the weakest draft ever. I think a lot of people say that haven't really seen like that quote unquote like star power. Like there's no LeBron, there's no Zion, there's no Wemby, but I think there's a lot of talent in this upcoming draft, honestly.
Yeah, there's the thing I'll say about that is it is a weak draft. I think that is a fact. There's a difference between people when we called 2020 a weak draft. You had guys like LaMelo Ball, Anthony Edwards, even, Tyrese Halliburton, Tyrese Maxey. Those guys projected as people who could be creators in the NBA. This year, all you really have is Rob Dillingham. Maybe if you're a Topic or a Isaiah Collier guy, those are the guys who really project as people who could be primary options or secondary options in the NBA. That's the biggest difference in this class in comparison to some others. So you're looking more at guys who are going to help in other ways. You have a lot of bigs in this class. Obviously, the Pistons aren't in the market for that necessarily in the biggest way. But, like, you have a lot of bigs who I think could play real starters minutes in the future, from Sar down to Klingon to Khalil Ware to Yves Missi to Zach Edey, who have a shot at making an impact in that way. So, yeah.
I'm glad you said Zach Edey. Quick question: is he a lottery pick or not? Because some people say he is, some people say he isn't. I think he's like late first round, early second.
Yeah, for me, I think that I wouldn't take him in the lottery. I think that he has a very good chance of being a unique weapon for a team. I think that he's shown, just being that size, his rim deterrence, being able to finish well around the rim, his touch. Obviously, he always goes to that right hook over the left shoulder. He's not gonna post up as many times as he in college as he did in college in the NBA. So like he's gonna have to make some real changes to being more of a screener, which he is good at when he's done it, and roller. But I think that he's more of a late first round type of guy. I think that I have been very skeptical just because it's so hard to use certain bigs like him in the NBA. But when they are good, there's a spot for them in at least like some type of role. So yeah, I would say I wouldn't take him in the lottery, but late first, mid first in the right situation, I think that he could really, really pop.
Yeah, I always said he's a niche type player. It's kind of like a matchup thing. Like if you just want to play bully ball, he'd be perfect. But
Yeah.
I don't think he's like an everyday starter or everyday like player that you want to play like high 30s like every night. But I think if he was coming off the bench as like a rotational piece, like 15, 20 minutes a night, I think it could be effective.
Yeah, I think also just there's certain guys where it's like when you're 7'4" and can be effective in certain ways, he could be a matchup issue in himself, maybe not in a way like again we come back to like the drop defense and just doing that full time and I think against NBA level shot makers he's going to struggle early, but there's still uh, a spot or a lane for him to be able to make an impact in doing that just because he does take up so much room and he is a solid shot blocker and can affect shots there. So there's some ways that I think he's going to be able to make an impact, but the levels of which and just kind of looking at his college production, I think that's where we get a little bit skewed. But in this class, it's kind of the perfect storm to boost a guy like that in a way that it wouldn't have happened in previous years.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I loved watching March Madness because so many people hate him, and I don't really know why. Like he was just kind of playing like the villain. Like it's like how do you hate a guy like that? I mean, because he's a little bit obnoxious. Like who cares? Like play the villain role. Like I enjoyed actually watching like March Madness this year, even though my brackets got screwed the first day. I still enjoyed watching it.
Man, those my bracket this year it wasn't as bad as last year, but yeah, it was fun to watch. Kind of a throwback with Edie and Klingon. I don't love that style of basketball personally, but in doses, one time, a few times, that's fine with me.
I mean, I grew up on that style of basketball, so it was kind of like nostalgic. I was just like, man, like I can't like growing up watching the Pistons like hold people down to like 70 points a game. It's just like insane. Like
just
you don't see that too often anymore.
9 people in the paint at all times, right around it. Yeah.
I mean, we're still doing that now in 2024, but hey, man.
True.
One of the prospects that I think a lot of Pistons fans are very intrigued with is Zachary Richey. So my question to you is like looking at their roster, kind of looking at their, I don't want to say they don't have wings, but kind of like lack of wing depth that they do currently have. Do you think he would be the best fit for the Detroit Pistons?
I think probably technically he's the best fit for the Pistons and a lot of teams. Just for what you said, a guy that can ideally come in and make threes, do a little bit of connected things, moves well, plays really good off-ball defense, do things of that nature, and kind of fill the gaps for the rest of the guys. Obviously, give Cade a little bit more space. Another wing to play alongside a guy like Asar. He has his struggles, but at the same time, the direction that he's gone in over the last 2 months, I just don't know if he's going to end up being a top 5 caliber guy in this class. Some of his struggles when the shot isn't going, and these were the struggles that I had on him coming into the season. That was my biggest hesitation, and why I was a little bit lower on him coming into the season, and they have reappeared in a way that makes me nervous for his NBA prospects, because when he doesn't have open threes, the offensive impact is fairly minimal. He's not super physical. He can be really passive by nature. And, I just think there's a lot of things there that he's going to have to work on. Now, I still think that there's some people who are even lower on him than I am. I still think that the archetype of player that he is and the high stretch that he did have this season are worth betting on at a certain point. But there are some issues there that would make it a little bit tougher to have him as that's kind of the guy that we want with a guaranteed top 5 pick than before or earlier on in the season.
Yeah, I had a Pistons beat reporter on last week, and he told me like what he heard from the organization. Like they are high on 3 guys. It's Richey. I want to say it's the other French forward out of Chalette. I can't think of his name right now.
Tijon Salon.
Salong, and then Sarr. Those are the 3 guys apparently that they're like really zeroing on in. That's like three guys on their big board that they like really love right now. But I was talking with someone, they're like, yeah, he's not shooting like as well as he was to start the season. Like he's in like a really bad shooting slump. Like maybe this isn't the guy that we maybe think could be an ideal fit. And I kind of saw what you were saying, because I pulled up a recent game, and like when they kind of run him off the 3-point line, he's kind of limited. Like he doesn't really kind of makes mistakes, kind of rushes it sometimes. But I don't know. It's just when you kind of look at that shooting, I think it could translate. But to what you were saying, maybe it's not all there. Maybe he needs another year or two to develop. And I mean, the Pistons don't really have a really good track record with drafting French players. I mean, Sekou, Killian, who I both have their jerseys. Like I was so high on Sekou, I don't know what happened. I just don't. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just a sick individual having a Sekou and a Killian jersey still.
Hey, that's you supporting the team. I feel it. Yeah, but that's the thing with Reza Shea at this point. It's obviously on paper, that's the guy who everybody wants. This is the guy who teams around the league went from your Brandon Miller level prospects to like Cam Johnson. You know, that level of outcome between or a guy who kind of feels that 3-and-D mold but can do a little bit more as a connector or off the dribble or get more into that kind of star level creator range. That's the guy who everybody wants. So it makes sense that the Pistons would covet that in a way, but also I just have a little bit more skepticism of him as a player, especially, you know, when he does get ran off the line, when the shots aren't there as easily or as wide open, his decision making when he does have to, you know, drive to the rim, both as a passer and just kind of getting to pull-ups and all the way to the rim. Like those things are stuff that he has to continue to work on. So that's the hesitation.
Yeah, like I said, I did want to ask you because I feel like a lot of people they're probably going on Tankathon every day and like looking at the prospects and seeing a French guy that's like top 5 and looking at his stats, like he shoots like what 40%. Like let's draft him right now. But if you do watch highlights or even just like turn on a full game of him, like there's a lot to like. But I think he's a prospect that might take maybe a year or two to like fully like what's the word I'm looking for? Get used to the NBA in a sense where it's a lot more physical than it is over in Europe. So, you know, maybe it takes him a year, maybe it doesn't. Maybe he just, you know, comes into the NBA and just shoots the hell out of the ball. You never know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the next questions I had was, are there any under the radar players that you see that could go in the top 5?
Under the radar players, I feel like this year is kind of interesting for that because honestly, everybody has been mocked or put on the board as like top 5 for. If you look in the right places, you could get somebody who still has Cody Williams top 5, or as soon as last week we had somebody put Dalton Connect top 5, which I don't think is happening. But like everybody has kind of been in the mix in a way. As to like last year, we had Scoot. Wemby, Scoot, Brandon Miller. It kind of had like a lock of the Thompson twins in that sort of that range of going high. So I don't know. I would say probably maybe like I don't know. I don't think I have a true answer for that. I think that there's probably like 10 people. Maybe Stephon Castle. He's not under the radar. He's not necessarily under the radar, but I think that he has a good chance of going top 5 in a certain situation.
Yeah, I mean, he had a really good tournament. I think a lot of people, you know, were watching March Madness and they got to see what he was doing at winning a national championship and just being a defensive menace out there. Like it's insane. I would say a lot. The one name that I keep seeing, and it's just among Pistons fans, is Cody Williams, obviously, because he is a small forward, brother of Jalen Williams. Is that a guy that they could possibly look at of just like kind of just taking a swing for a guy like that?
I think it's a possibility. Again, we've reached kind of a certain point during that second half of the season where I have just a few more questions in him than, I like the idea of him maybe a little bit more than what might actually be there because of some of his issues with physicality, low volume 3-point shooter, knocked down, 40%, but still low volume there. The footwork and an ability to get into pull-ups and, do other things that aren't just shoot spot up threes and straight line drives to the rim. And he has some upside as a slasher. That's probably one of his best attributes as a player, but just being able to do it in different ways is something that he still has to work on. So I don't know. I think if you buy the shot and you're a fan of it, I think he's somebody that could make sense there as like a toolsy wing who can do a little bit of everything and, fit in with this group. Again, if not, which I'm a little bit more skeptical, I think there's probably going to end up being some more options that would make more sense there.
Yeah, I think the one player, I don't really know if this is like known knowledge, but Michael Tellem, who's an agent, his dad is the VP of the Pistons. He's got a client, Mateus Bezelis, who will probably be a top 5 pick. And I don't know if you've like really followed the Pistons too deeply, but I mean, like we've actually like promised prospects to draft. Like we promised to draft Davidas Servitas in the second round over like guys like JJ Hardy. And Servitas is like still I think he's in the G League with the Pacers, but their G League affiliate. But like that could be a guy they maybe look at 5. Is he a prospect do you think that could fit on this team?
Yeah, I like you said Buzelis, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it broke up for a second, but yeah, I think Modest is somebody that actually does fit, not necessarily as much as you'd like because he does have he's going to need to regain the 3-point shot that he showed in his senior year of high school at Sunrise, but he does have a lot of qualities that I like for this team. I think he's somebody that could eventually play the 4 and play the 3 in the NBA. He does a lot of connective things in terms of being able to dribble, pass, and eventually shoot as a big wing. And I think that he could, and also on the defensive end, he has some upside as a help side rim protector that I think would be really useful, especially if you have like a guy like Jalen Duren back there as more of your anchor big, or whoever else it ends up being that guy. I think that he could provide value in that way. So I think he's somebody that I personally would consider fairly high on my Pistons board. Obviously, the shot is going to have a big say in how well he translates to the NBA game because he is more of a connective guy than like this creator wing that he was billed as coming into the year. But yeah, he'd be fairly high on my list of guys for the Pistons.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we did draft him, just like given obviously he's represented by Michael Tellem, and Pistons VP is Arn Tellem. We even have his son. He's a pro director of scouting, Eric. So I mean, like there's a lot of Tellems that do work for the Pistons in their front office. It's something that I think a lot of Pistons fans, maybe they know, maybe they don't. I'm not entirely sure if they do or not, but that's something that like kind of keep an eye on, especially like when you get into the agent ties, especially with drafts, you never really know. But I liked him from afar. I mean, even like looking at stuff from a few years ago when he was in high school, I thought he was a really good player.
Yeah, I think that he has some of the most upside in the class. There's kind of a fluctuating range on, where people would take him. Some people might like him more top 10-ish. I think he's more of a top 5, 6-ish guy in the class.
Yeah, I mean, I think the potential and the ceiling is just through the roof with him. Like if he can just develop and put everything together, I think he's just a really good player. Do you have time for a couple of questions from people that are watching right now?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, cool. This comes from Chili. He wants to know, is there talent in this draft that people would be willing to trade to get a top 3 pick? So he's basically asking, do you think if the Pistons got a top 3 pick, they could move it for maybe a proven I'll just use a player as an example, like a Lauri Markkanen, for example. Do you think if the Pistons were to land a top 3 pick, do you think a top 3 pick would be enough to get maybe a proven NBA player?
I honestly, I don't know that there's the level of Lauri Markkanen, probably not, but I do think getting in the top 3 would be fairly valuable. There will be some sort of suitors out there looking. It might not be a long list, but with the opportunity to draft an Alex Sarr or whoever that next guy might be for a certain team, I think that you could get somebody. Like maybe you package, let's see. Maybe you package the top 3 pick with Jaden Ivey to the Brooklyn Nets, and they give you Mikal Bridges, like depending on the level of or what they're kind of going in as a organization. That would be kind of the framework. I don't know if that's too much, depending on your opinion of Ivey, but that would kind of be the framework.
I think the fact that you said top 3 pick Ivey and Mikal Bridges, I think all Pistons fans love you to death. Because we've talked about that like so much with Mikal Bridges, but I don't know what Brooklyn's going to do.
Exactly.
I mean, you got offered Jalen Green and maybe Sengun and a couple picks, and you turned it down. I mean, the year before Memphis offered you 4 firsts and you turned it down. Like, I don't know if they're trying to build around him. I don't know if they're just kind of content with being middle of the pack or what.
It broke up for a second. What'd you say? I missed that last part.
So I don't know if Brooklyn is just content with being like middle of the pack, trying to build around a Mikal Bridges.
Yeah, you said middle of the pack. I think they're in that weird space where they need to kind of pick a direction as a team. And so that they would be kind of one of my top suitors for a potential, if the Pistons want to look to maybe all the guys at the top don't necessarily fit what they want to do exactly right now, get a more established guy in some fashion and give up maybe one of your young assets in the process.
Yeah, for sure. I like I said, I would not be surprised if they trade it. I mean, I've had a couple of Pistons reporters saying like, "Just trade the pick. Like, we don't need any more 19-year-olds," especially given the coach that we have that has kind of had to basically get told like, stop playing Killian Hayes, play Jaden Ivey, put the ball in his hands. Like that's kind of like where we were at this season. Like, you have to have like 4 people tell you like, "Hey, like, play your 5th pick from last year." Pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah, that was especially that period of time, and then going into the losing streak. That was and I'm not a Pistons fan, and I was upset, with the whole situation too.
Oh yeah, like I'm pretty good friends with like his family, and his dad is just like the smartest guy in the room. Like what are we doing? Like, what are we doing not playing him like 10 minutes? 15 minutes. I was like, give him at least 25 minutes. How's he going to learn sitting on the bench? Like, I don't get it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm actually not too familiar with this prospect. I'm sure you are. This comes from Game Nuts. He said, "What's your thoughts on Devin Carter? I loved his game at Providence, and I think he could be a slightly better than Cole Anthony / Braden Paz type of player. What's holding him back?"
Yeah, I like Devin Carter. I think that he's a really solid prospect as a sort of utility guard, kind of combo guard who makes his impact most felt on the defensive end, flying around, big time playmaker on that end, somebody who I think can make a real impact at the point of attack and just kind of playing passing lanes, being smart on that end, really good athlete as well. And then offensively, the jump that he made as a shooter this year and just as an overall creator is what got him into being in, I think, potentially late lottery conversations into the top 20. The thing that's really holding him back for me is his passing and ability to kind of run the show as more of a point guard or even kind of a secondary ball handler. I still have some questions in that aspect. And then also just given the past that he has been has struggled as a shooter, and then this year kind of broke out. You always have those sort of things to consider in the level of shooter that he'll be in, and he kind of has a little bit of a funky motion as well. But yeah, I think that he's a really solid player. I think he could very easily end up being that kind of Podziemski type of guy in this class, is just a guy who gets in there and does a little bit of everything, and especially in a, hopefully he lands in a good situation where he's not necessarily tasked with doing a whole bunch more, but I like him a lot. And I see, like, even what Deuce McBride has done this year for the Knicks, that's kind of the same lane for him as a player.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know Stephen A. Smith thought it was Quentin Grimes, but I don't know if you saw that.
I did see that.
That was
I'm hoping that's the mistake that he made. Yeah.
Either I know he works a lot. Maybe he doesn't get to watch every Knick game, but I'm just hoping like he didn't think that Quentin Grimes was Deuce McBride, because they play completely different.
Yeah, that's the thing with those jobs, is those dudes work 24/7, get on TV and talk all day at 4 a.m. There's no way you have the time to have as strong as an opinion that you do about certain topics, because you don't have it. Like, you had to get up at 4 a.m. this morning. You're telling me you watched that entire game on the East Coast to 1 a.m.? Like, come on. But yeah, that's a whole nother.
Well, I think I made it funny because he proclaims himself as a diehard Knick fan, and like I have a couple of friends that are like huge Knick fans. Like, when like, we don't claim him, we don't claim Stephen A. I was like, damn, it's like that. Oh man, that's
tough.
Funny. I don't know if we talked about Reed Sheppard. Someone had asked if the Pistons were at third, would he be a player that they could look at?
I think it's a possibility. I think there's probably I feel pretty confident about who he's going to be as a player. I think he's going to contribute in some fashion in the NBA, and obviously what he does fits with the current group. So that would be a lot of the appeal. I would have just a little bit of pushback on picking him third, because I do have certain questions in his creation. Obviously, picking a guy that high who is 6'3" with a 6'3" wingspan doesn't necessarily have the most outstanding physical attributes. That's just not something we look in the NBA and really see too often, especially if you're more of a combo guard than like a lead creator. So those would be my kind of my pushbacks on that. But especially I think there would just be a few options that I would like more. But if we get to 5, then I think it's pretty. He's very close to the top of the list of guys who I would consider.
Yeah, I think the one thing with him is just the shooting. Like, I think that's where I look at him, and it's just like he could contribute, whether he's off the bench or maybe they want to put him as a 2 guard next to Cade, because like they don't really have like a quote unquote traditional like 2 guard. Like, they don't have like a movement shooter, which I think that's what they need. And I think that's why the Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey backcourt has kind of struggled at times, because both of them don't know what to do in terms of like setting up the offense, because they're kind of like splitting it. And it's not like a dedicated, like, I guess the roles aren't really defined yet. They're just kind of just sharing time as the primary ball handler. But I think if you were to take a guy like Reed, I think it would make a lot of sense if you want to slot him in it too. Yeah,
for sure.
Let's see. You guys are crazy. I'm not even touching that. Someone wanted to know with Ronnie James. I know you've probably talked about him. Do you think he's going to get drafted this year, or do you think it's just him putting his name in the draft, hoping to possibly get drafted by an NBA team?
I think at this point, I'm leaning towards he ends up getting drafted by that Lakers second round pick, or they get him a 2-way, just going undrafted and him getting into an organization just because he has declared. Now, I think that it makes most sense for him personally to take another year in college and go somewhere where you're valued, you can be fully healthy, and just build up confidence for yourself, one, and then also just having a season that's more impactful. But I do think he is a future NBA talent, which is kind of differing from kind of the popular opinion who just look at his stats and don't necessarily know what he brings to the table as a player. So, yeah, I think that it's going to be interesting to see over the next, several weeks and months, whatever happens in the combine or, his transfer options that may arise as a player. But yeah, I think that he's just going to get pushed in the direction of like, let's just go ahead and get you into the Lakers situation and you try to figure it out from there and kind of play your game next to LeBron. They got that whole father and son Ken Griffey, thing going on.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
Yeah, I think I do agree with you. I think some teams might stay away just knowing like maybe the ramifications of like maybe a team's feeling petty and they just couldn't maybe they have an extra second just to try to get something from the Lakers, like to say like, hey, I know LeBron wants them, like why not, Yeah. But I do agree. I think maybe another year of college for him wouldn't be the worst thing in the world personally, because he did have that, I think it was a cardiac arrest if I do remember correctly. And like I said, the fact that, he did get to come back, he did get to play. And if you did watch some of the games, I mean, the stats don't really do it justice. I think he's a plus defender in the NBA. I think he'll be a good defender. But I'm not in the ballpark of, some Pistons fans say take him with their pick this year. I swear some Pistons fans, they want Bronny James and Zach Edey with their picks. I was like, you guys, the most polarizing names in the draft this year, I would assume, but I don't think they're worth a top 5 pick personally.
If LeBron is coming with, maybe you consider if you have that guarantee. But other than that, yeah, definitely need to maybe the second round pick from the Knicks, I believe, if that opportunity presented itself, But yeah.
Yeah, like I said, it's some people. I don't know. Some people get like they just see the name and they don't really watch a whole lot of college basketball or like, get into it. It's kind of funny sometimes, like talking to people. Someone's like draft Brownie. I was like, with the second round pick, he's like, no, top 5. I'm like, brother, no, like he's good, but. Like I said, I think he's just going to be a Laker. I think it's NBA is so scripted. Like he's going to the Lakers. He's going to play with LeBron. He's probably going to be like a backup point guard or something like that. Like can't tell me.
That's what I see.
Let's see. We'll do one more question, then we can wrap it up. I don't want to keep you on too long.
Yeah, that's all good.
Okay. Let's see. I had it. I must have forgot to start. Oh, this is this is just like a free agency question. Do you think like fit wise, Jonathan Isaac would be a player that the Pistons should look at, like kind of given his just defensive impact and just a wing that I think that could probably change a whole lot?
I feel like Jonathan Isaac is this is a big if, but like when he's healthy, he's one of the probably 5 most impactful defenders in the NBA in his minutes. Like I think it's not even really that debatable. And he would instantly bring that floor up for a team like the Pistons, no matter how many minutes that he actually plays. So I think it'd definitely be somebody worth considering, given his versatility and just uniqueness.
Something about those Florida State wings. I don't know what it is. They're just like, I remember falling in love with Pat Williams a couple of years ago. I know a lot of Pistons fans did too. And I mean, even though like his stint so far in the NBA hasn't been too successful, he's a pretty good defender.
Yeah, he's solid.
I swear some of these questions are pretty wild. I'm not gonna answer them. saw a Duke question about their center. I'm trying to find it. They wanted to know if they. Here it is. Do you think Flip? I can't pronounce his last name.
Filipowski, yeah.
Filipowski of Duke is fitting at the 4 or the 5 at the next level.
It's gonna be a tough thing. I've kind of tried to figure that out over the course of the year also. I think he's probably gonna end up fitting best at the 4. I don't know. It's hard because there's such a double-edged sword in his game, because he can hopefully, shoot a little bit better percentage from 3, but space the floor ideally, do a little bit, attacking closeouts and just making plays and being able to do things of that nature. But at the same time, he doesn't necessarily have the best foot speed to kind of cover ground and handle those responsibilities. He also did get better in terms of his pick and roll coverage this year and just being in the right spots. And I think that could help him play a little bit more 5. So I don't have a fully definitive answer. I think my guess would probably be the 4. He got eaten alive by DJ Burns in the tournament, which kind of, raised my eyebrows again. It just him being able to handle some of those responsibilities. But yeah, I don't know. We'll have to kind of wait and see. That's kind of the big question with him.
Yeah, I mean DJ Burns, I fell in love with that kid so fast. Because he reminded me of Zach Randolph a little bit, just like a throwback, just the way he plays.
Yeah.
It's so crazy, watching college basketball and watching kids get NIL deals when they win.
Yeah, right after the game, you get Jack Golke doing a tax advertisement and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Oakland, crazy. They retired Coach K. So crazy.
Yeah, that was a fun little extra story, I'm sure, for you guys up there too.
We weren't really surprised by it, honestly. Given who the Coach Campy is, and there's a lot of I think a lot of people, they kind of when they look at programs that aren't Michigan States, or just even D1. They look at Oakland's and stuff like that they can't beat a college team when they had shooters, they had spacing, they had really good guard play. It didn't surprise me that they gave Duke some problems.
Yeah, they played a great game. Goalkeeper was unbelievable. Also, it's just making everything.
Sure. We'll do one more question. I keep saying that. Thoughts on Stephon Castle and moving on from Ivy? Do you think that would be a better fit wise of moving off Jaden Ivey and replacing him with Stephon Castle?
No, I don't think so. I think Ivy is far more dynamic. He's a better shot maker. Obviously, he's had some of the certain issues over his career defensively, but I think what he brings and his upside of kind of figuring things out is a little more than what Stephon Castle has ever shown to this point. Now, I think Castle is going to have a similar role or impact to what Asar does. So that would be kind of the move if you were wanting to do that, which I wouldn't personally. But yeah, he's kind of a guy who I don't necessarily see fitting in Detroit very well at all, unless you think that he's just going to become a better shooter and be more aggressive and stop hesitating on certain things in a big way and regain some of the shot creation that he showed in high school.
Yeah, I mean, from a defensive side, I could see why Pistons fans like him, but I mean, I think they need more players that can create their own shot and put balls in the basket. I mean, I think they were ranked close to last place in the NBA in 3-point percentage. Can't have guys shooting under 20% from 3 and they're starting. I love Asar, but if that shot really doesn't translate, I've had conversations maybe he's just a Al-Farouq Aminu or maybe a Andre Roberson type of player. I mean, that's fine. There's roles for players like that in the league. They'll always have places in the league, but I don't think the Pistons could gamble and try to take another guy that's known more for his defense and his offense.
Yeah, he would. It would be very difficult to run out Cade, Castle, Asar, Stu, and Duran, or insert whoever at the 4. It'd be tough.
Yeah, for sure. I did want to give you the floor again, to tell people where they can find you, tell people how they can, support you, any projects that you're working on your YouTube channel that you want to tell the viewers about.
Yeah, so you can find me on YouTube, Hoop Intellect. A lot of draft stuff coming out over the next couple months up until draft night, and then you can also follow me on Twitter. We'll post other types of content and things draft related on there as well, and just commentary on NBA happenings, playoffs coming up, and all that kind of stuff over there. But yeah, that's pretty much what it is. For me, I have a big board dropping this week, probably an update from after March Madness. So for those people interested in that'll be up soon. So yeah, stay tuned for that.
Yeah, I do like those big boards. I can't imagine how long they actually take to make. Like sometimes they're like 30, 40 minutes long. I said, I know that takes like at least a few days just to make and find the highlights and clip everything up. Like I respect the hustle and the work you do put in, because in my opinion, I think you're one of the best just draft YouTubers out there. But do appreciate you coming
I
on.
appreciate it, for sure. It does take a minute though.
Yeah, it sounds like I understand. Like it's crazy. I do have your YouTube down in the description below for anyone that's watching that wants to go over to your YouTube channel and subscribe and support it. I highly recommend you guys do, especially with it being mock draft season, NBA draft season. You're probably going to see a whole lot from him. Thank you so much for coming on, man. I do really appreciate it. I know we worked to try to get you on, and I'm happy I finally did get to talk to you, talk some draft with you.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you having me on, man.
For sure. See you guys next week, guys. Peace.